ဒီနေ့မနေ့ကပြောတဲ့ဣန္ဒြေထိတ်ကြောင်း9ပါးရဲ့ကနောက်ဆုံး9ခုမြောက်ဣန္ဒြေထိတ်ကြောင်းပေါ့လမ်းဆုံးမရောက်လက်မမြောက်တောက်လျှောက်သွားရမယ်ဆိုတာကိုကြီးမနဲ့ပန်းတိုင်မရောက်မချင်းတောက်လျှောက်သွားရမယ်ဆိုတာပရကမဝိရိယအစဉ်စဉ်နဲ့သွားရမယ်ဆိုတာအဲ့ဒီသွားပုံလေးတွေစိတ်တင်းတင်းထားပြီးတော့သွားပုံလေးတွေရှေ့ကဥထုကြောင့်လေးတစ်ခုနဲ့တန်စာဆင်ပြီးတော့ဖြည့်ရှင်းပြပါရစေ
As a sort of sequel to yesterday's talk on the ninth factor conducive to the sharpening of the controlling faculties, namely not giving up, not surrendering, but practicing straight on until one reaches one's desired goal. Sayadaw would like to tell a little tale today.
Buddhaမြတ်စွာတာဝတိမြို့စီတွန်ကျောင်းတော်မှာတရင်သုံးတော်မူတော့ညတန်ခါရောခါမှာနတ်သားတူကနတ်သမီးပေါင်းခြံရံပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေသူပြေလောကယဟန်ဘဝနဲ့နေခြင်းကတရားအားထုတ်လို့တရားသူမရပုံလေးတွေပေါ့လေဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့တရားပဲလို့ကျင့်သုံးရမယ်ဆိုတာမြတ်စွာဘုရားလျှောက်ထားဖို့မြတ်စွာဘုရားကဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့အလုပ်ပေးတရားပေါ့လေညွှန်ကြားပုံလေးပါပဲအဲ့ဒါကတော့တန်ယုတ္တနိကေတက္ကရာဝကတန်ယုတ်ဣစရာခဏတုတ်တံပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒီတုတ်တံလေးနဲ့တန်စာဆင်းပြီးတော့ပြောမှာပါ
တာဝတိဘာကြောင့်
ဒီမြို့စီတုံကြောင့်
စီတုံကြောင့် Well, the story begins at the time when the Buddha was staying in Jeravana monastery, just in the outskirts of Savatthi. Seems that in the middle of the night, a deva descended from the heavenly realms together with his retinue of deva princesses and approached the Buddha. Paid his respects, and asked about how he should continue his practice, as he had been doing when he was a monk, and then he had died and became a deva. So this story comes from the Samyutta Nikaya and is in one of the sutras there.
Yes, we have time. Yachi Vida. Yes, we have we shout Havare. Acharakana Sangotan. Pisaja Kana Sevitan. Wananda Mohana Nama Katan Yatra Voisati. David Garo. Yes, we have here. Nabi Loka Yiha. To Yawya Pit and Nabi Loka Yiha. Natami upon Sunya Lava.
After he had paid respects to the Buddha and stood on one side, he addressed the Buddha in a verse that was recited by the Sayadaw just now in Pali. The first part, the translation of the first part of the verse is O Lord Buddha, Devaland is really very noisy. It's full of noise from the retinue of Deva princesses.
Pisaja Gana Sevita Sara Natami go to Anatamilu Miusa Paluma Rilu Pita Sasara Pita Mari Ludilu Usare Pita Marine Piene Nivare Pita Mari Pio Muya Tana Dilusura Edruleve Timbia Shautavare.
He continued. But these Deva princesses look like petos to me, look like hungry ghosts. They are like hungry ghosts frolicking in their own land.
You're not the media, Dia Hoja, the Chen Soja. Sunyani the other Masalochi, D. Tani Job. The other must say where was I normally. Do we be bought? Say, could show crazy be bought. Come go, I only a way and it is so. Do me, I say, show trade water. Tajamalu Mona, Namata. Miai say shook twizy by the fair, good yema solution in the Goa. Wadana parable cumia. Do be loga wadana parable cumia. Not be loga yaula lucy, at the kuduri, miller on ube. Kamagone, moo may be dog. One ain't look by it. Mohana, do we see the kudu mazy, the say shook twizy the body. And do tempia about it.
Confusing it is to be in such a place, he complained. For you can imagine how it would be like to be surrounded by all these fairy bells who are singing and dancing and playing their various instruments. He felt very distracted because he was a monk before he became a deva. And for a person who is really very committed to the Dhamma, this is pretty disturbing. With so many distractions, visual as well as audio, how can one concentrate in one's Dhamma? Concentrate on one's Dhamma. And also for people who have a deep interest in developing wholesome activities and mental states, to be born in the Deva world is like landing yourself up in a tavern, getting intoxicated by all these sensual pleasures and forgetting totally about wholesome deeds and activities.
Say, look, Shazia Kamu Ione Mumizia Tana Rema needed so that to other totally change a mini. Change a mini. Trepo Maduiluchi Trepo Shabira look on Be and not Dorabo. Eddie change a meter them have a count of Timida Nimu Dualuchi Trepo Machiro Sierra never joke my book. Tamalo Duado Trepo Shade ထွက်ပေါက်မတွေ့တော့မြတ်စွာဘုရားသွားပြီးတော့မေးတယ်
So this Deva felt like a loser. He was born in Deva land and he felt pretty trapped. Surrounded by all those distractions, he couldn't concentrate on the Dhamma that he was practicing before he died. And it's good that he felt trapped and he was looking for an opening, looking for a place to escape to. If one finds oneself in such a situation and does not even think of wanting to escape, but gets engulfed by all those sensual pleasures and distractions, then that would surely be the end of your career as the Dhammaphara. So he was desperate, he was looking for a place, looking for an opening to run away. But he couldn't find it in the Deva world. Therefore, immediately he descended from the celestial realms and sought the advice and help of the Buddha.
အဲ့ဒါနတ်ပြည်လောကရောက်လူတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များသတိထားဖို့ပဲဟိုရောက်မှကာမဂုဏ်တော်တဲ့ရောက်ပြီးတော့ထွက်ပေါက်မတွေ့လို့ရှိရင်တော့ရှေ့ထက်တန်းကြတဲ့ကုသိုလ်တွေပွားခွင့်မရလို့ရှိရင်တော့အဲ့ဒါခက်တော့တာပဲ
This is a great reminder for people who land up in the Deva world. Once you find yourself in the forest of sensual pleasures, and if you don't look hard enough for an opening, for a way of escape, then you're in for it. နတ်ပြည်လောကကိုဉာဏ်တူးမရှိလို့ဦးလောလောဆယ်မမြင်ရဘူးထားပါတော့ခုကာမဂုဏ်ပေါ်တဲ့ရုပ်ထုပစ္စည်းတွေအမှန်တကျွဲပါတဲ့အမေရိကတိုင်းပြည်ကြီးကကာမဂုဏ်လိုက်စားတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေပဲကြည့်ပေါ့ဘယ်လောက်ကာမဂုဏ်လိုက်စားတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေများတယ်လေဆိုတာပေါ့လေပြီးတော့ဒီကာမဂုဏ်တော်တဲ့မှာနေတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေဟာအမှန်တရားကိုမတွေ့နိုင်တော့အောင်အဲ့ဒီကာမဂုဏ်တွေနဲ့မူးမေ့ပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေဒီထဲမှာနှင်မိုးနေတာပဲကြည့်ပေါ့ဒီလောကမှာတလောက်ကာမဂုဏ်တွေများနေလို့ရှိရင်နတ်လောကမှာဘယ်လောက်များမလဲဆိုတာချိန်ဆကြည့်ဖို့ပါပဲ Well, you may not be able to see the Deva world with your own eyes. That is not very important. Perhaps you can just look around yourself. Look at the Deva world on this planet. Look at America. It's reputedly a very materially advanced country. You have a vast variety of sensual pleasures available. Look at the people who are wallowing in sensual distractions. Look at how they get intoxicated by the luxuries and pleasures of life. Look at how they are drowned in the sensual happiness that they cherish so much. Is it possible for such people to even think of coming to a retreat, to understand the Dhamma, to see the real Dhamma? This is a little bit of a story. Akuပြောခဲ့မြတ်စွာဘုရားကိုရှောက်ထားတဲ့နတ်သားဟာလူပြေလောကနေစဉ်ကာလကမြတ်စွာဘုရားသာသနာတော်မှာယဟန်ပြုပြီးတော့ဆရာသမားဝီကြီးဝင်ငယ်တွေသတင်းသုံးပေါ်မှာဝီကြီးဝင်ငယ်တွေပြည့်ပြည့်စုံစုံဖြစ်ကျင်ပြီးတော့ငါးဝပြည့်မြောက်တဲ့အခါသတင်းကျွလို့ပွာရဏပြုပြီးဝီနည်းရဲ့အခြေခံတွေလည်းပဲလေ့လာပြီးတော့ဝီနည်းနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့အကြောင်းအရာတွေပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒါလေးလည်းပဲသင်ကြားပြီးစိတ်ကြိုက်ကမ္မထံယူပြီးတော့
တောထဲသွားပြီးတော့တရားအထုတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ပါ
It might be interesting for you to know a little of the background of this unhappy Deva. Before his rebirth in Deva land, he was a human being like all of us are. He was a man and he had much faith in the Buddhist teaching, had left his home, become a renunciate, he had become a bhikkhu. And for the first 5 years of his bhikkhu life, he spent doing the lesser and greater duties, the greater and minor duties, to his preceptor and his teacher, learning at the same time the various and numerous rules and regulations pertaining to the code of conduct for a bhikkhu. After 5 years, after having mastered the rules and regulations, the code of discipline for a bhikkhu, he was independent. There is, if you're not aware, a certain rule for bhikkhus, and that is that they must serve a term of at least 5 years of dependence on a particular teacher or preceptor, so that they can become competent with respect to the greater and lesser duties of a bhikkhu and the master, as well as the various rules and regulations required in order the various rules and regulations governing the life of a bhikkhu. So having completed his 5 reigns and having mastered the Vinaya, the code of discipline, he made his invitation, which again is another ceremony, at the end of a reign's residence, where bhikkhus invite each other to have compassion and metta and to tell each other of their faults or shortcomings so that they can correct one another, correct oneself for the better. After having made his invitation, he took up a meditation object which he had a preference for and retired to the forest to strive on this path of deliverance.
Warita Dila Kore Tamichedi Leve Shang Shabido Dila Nebizo be Yahan what diaboli, changing Boma Siadamoma, pure what diari Gigi Bumune, Pitchiness Rada, Tadanaba, when I Gigi the Kesabe. Pero Nawa Mapi Dege We need Mata Degin, Siane Kingwa, Mania Woos Raboli. Very piare. Any need you with a point of look up my lay. The Lodiari Adobe so ye. Changing Boma what they are so that she about it. They are to me about the video. She got Chuma Bonga as I want in Madiruchi and never. But yes, only 2 options, you must make about the as you are Tamaga Dila, what is only something that a Diladi. Maybe no loshi, they are told him a people who's for our body. I really not a room of it. And I go too much chigani, piso, what is a piava in a massa.
You can observe from the account just given that it is very important for a bhikkhu to have a practical understanding of the greater and lesser duties required of a teacher and a student, as well as a student as well as the student to the teacher. There is a mutual sort of duty that is very essential in a teacher-student relationship. Secondly, you will also see that you can also observe that the requirement of having fulfilled at least 5 reigns, which is the minimum requirement. But what is more important is not the reigns, but whether you can completely have a practical grasp of the code of discipline required of a bhikkhu. So this monk had gone through those 2 requirements and was independent. This can also be applied to yogis. One should have a thorough knowledge of the duties, responsibilities and obligations that are due to one another. We should be well aware of our mutual responsibilities to one another, as well as obligations and duties. Not only to know them in theory, but also practically. Secondly, it is also essential to depend on a teacher to understand thoroughly, practically, the mechanics of observing the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts. To establish a purity of conduct that is essential. That is an essential foundation for mental development. This can also perhaps be applied to instructions for meditation. Unless one is really skilled with regards to one's own practice, one should always try to practice under the guidance of a teacher. Unless you have completed the whole string of Vipassana insights, one should always make it a point to practice under a reliable and competent teacher.
Tu mà thu raတဲ့ဂုဏ်လေးတခုရှိပါတယ်တရားထုတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကြီးအတူယူစရာပဲယဟန်ဖြစ်ဖြစ်လူပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပေါ့လေတန်လုကဝဋ္တိကဆိုတာပေါ့လေပေါ်ပါသောအသက်မွေးမှုရှိတယ်တဲ့ပေါ်ပါသောအသက်မွေးမှုရှိတယ်ဆိုတာဒီလိုတရားအထုတ်ခြင်းကြောင့်ရနိုင်တဲ့အကျိုးလေးတွေကိုရှေ့ရှုတယ်တရားရရင်ပြီးပြီတပိယတွေဘာမှအရေးမကြီးဘူးဆိုတာပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒီစိတ်ထားရှိထားတော့မလိုအပ်တဲ့ဟာတွေမသုံးဘူးအပကိစ္စဆိုတာပေါ့လေကိစ္စလည်းနည်းပါတယ်ဟိုဟာလှုပ်ခြင်းဒီဟာလှုပ်ခြင်းပေါ့လေဒီဟာမျိုးတွေမရှိဘူးအပကိစ္စလည်းဖြစ်တယ်အတ္တပုရခါဆိုတာပေါ့လေအကျိုးစီးပွားကိုရှေ့ရှုပြီးတော့ကိစ္စတွေနည်းပါတာအဲ့ဒါလိုနည်းပါတဲ့ဟာကိုပေါ်ပါတော့အသိမှုရှိတယ်လို့ဆိုပါတယ်တရားထုတ်သူဟာသိအရေးကြီးပါတယ်တရား
ဒီကောင်နခုလားဇလဝကဝတိ
ဟုတ်တယ်ဇလဝကဝတိဆိုပေါ်တော့အသိမှုရှိတယ်ဆိုတာအကျိုးကိုရှေ့ရှုထားတာဥတည်ထားတာပေါ့လေ
ဟုတ်ပြီတော့
ကျိုးရရင်တော်ပြီဆိုပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေကိစ္စနည်းပါအောင်နေတာအဲ့ဒါဇလဝကဝတိခေါ်တယ်
နော်အဘကိစ္စဆို
ဇလဝကဝတိအတိပဲပေါ့
This particular bhikkhu had a virtue that is quite remarkable. it is something which is really worthy of emulation, even for lay yogis. He had a very light livelihood, so to speak. He had total commitment to the Dhamma, and his only concern was for the attainment of the Dhamma, to realize the Dhamma. Other than that, everything else was secondary. So he could exercise contentment with whatever he had. He was able to make do, improvise, and be happy and contented with whatever that was available to him to support his life, his simple life as a bhikkhu. Another interpretation of this lightness of livelihood refers to little responsibilities. He was never immersed in much work. He spent as much time as possible trying to be mindful, trying to develop his meditation. And he was very, very sensitive of what was essential and what was redundant or superfluous.
Miane adute kha malwe da lo taw kaisa de pyu sia po pauk la bi so ye yogi ha Nwami kin ji lo thabo tha bi do ba le Nwami kin ha a chain tan ja do sajet myet khin ma bo li shin bi do myet sa ya de Sa ne kin nai ne tattwa de so do asa sa ya ma asa ma sa nai ma yat ti nai bu Ba me lo tu ta li ya le be ngel li so do ta le sait ma cha nai bu Thì đó ta có khoa vi đó miết toa sao vậy là về khét giống này đó, bây giờ mà lúc thà lúc mà xếp ta lại lúc thà lúc mà xếp miết mà sao lúc lại mà xếp thì đó nói mấy cái gì ha, ta có sao sao vậy cả, mà lúc mà cái nào đấy miết sao ya bị số lượng xếp miết lệ sa ta lại chỉ để ní này bỏ đi, lâu à đó lâu yogi à lại về Chadama kisa phép mya kisa phép bỏ đi Tao kisa đi bỏ bao là lúc chơi à lúc xì Nói ta đi này tu đấy Để ya của lẽ về Biến chi à đấy Nói mấy cái gì miết xa từ lâu bỏ đi mà Miết xa này đúng mà ta biến chi từ lâu bỏ Tao ở đây ya sao ya này đúng mà Mà cái lẽ mà lâu à hú Mà lẽ mà này à đấy Tao ở đây ya lại bị ông sao ya đấy mà Namaji miesa tachi de ni ne lawa me ama lu bi da ma lawa bu lo ti lo so lo da bo
However hard we may try to have as little responsibilities and duties as possible, sometimes it is not possible to have what one we wish, have what one wishes for. You have certain duties, you have certain responsibilities which you are required to take care of. And when that happens, it may be useful for you to remember the analogy of mother cow. As you know, cows are always very busy munching grass. They have to eat, and it seems as though they eat the whole day. in the fields grazing. Now there's this mother cow who's got a pretty young calf, and it's a naughty little calf, and she likes to wander around and she likes to do all sorts of mischievous things. So when mother cow goes to graze in the fields, she's got to keep an eye on the calf. She can't keep an eye on the calf all the time and sacrifice her munching of the grass. She'll starve at night. On the other hand, she can't just concentrate fully on grazing without keeping an eye on her child, on the calf. So what she's got to do is to take the calf along to the field and continue munching, grazing, but keeping an eye on the child, on the calf, so that it doesn't run too far away, so that it doesn't get to mischief. Similarly, for a yogi who's got a job to do, a duty to perform, one should try to do it in the same manner that mother cow is able to graze and keep an eye on her calf at the same time. So do your work and keep an eye on the Dhamma, on your mindfulness at the same time. Make sure that it doesn't wander off too far.
ပြီးတော့တကယ်တရားရလို့တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ဟာအချိန်ကိုလည်းပဲကန့်သတ်ဖို့လိုပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီယဟန်တော်ဟာအချိန်ကိုသူကအဲ့ချိန်မထားဘူးနေကင်းဘက်ကတော့နေ့ဘက်ကတော့တရားမှတ်နေပဲနေရတယ်ဆိုတာအများသိပြီးသားပါပဲနေ့ဘက်တရားမှတ်နေပဲညဘက်ကို၃ပိုင်းပိုင်းလိုက်တယ်ပထမယံပိုင်းအားထုတ်နေတယ်နေ့လိုပဲဒါပေမဲ့မြတ်စွာဘုရားကတော့ဒီနေ့လုံးလည်းအားထုတ်ရတယ်ညဥ်ပိုင်းလည်းပဲအားထုတ်ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ညစ်အလယ်ပိုင်းမှာပေါ့လေခန္ဓာကိုယ်ပင်မနွမ်းနေတော့တက်တာရစီဆိုတဲ့အနေနဲ့အပန်းဖြေတဲ့အနေမျိုးအိတ်ချိန်ခွင့်ပြုထားပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီအိတ်ချိန်ရောက်တာတော့မှယဟန်ဟာပမာရပြည့်ပြည့်ဖို့ပေါ့ကိလေသာတွေဝင်ပါဆိုလို့ကရင်ကိုခောက်ပြီးတော့နေရောညရောပေါ့လေအစာနည်းနည်းလေးနဲ့ဒီမှာတရားအထုတ်တယ်လို့ဒီလိုအဆိုရှိပါတယ်တရားပဲနှလုံးသွင်းနေတာပဲတရားကူလာပဲမလွတ်ရအောင်ပေါ့ဒီပေါ်တဲ့အာယုလေးတွေမလွတ်ရအောင်ပေါ့မပြတ်မှတ်နေတော့တာပဲ
Now this bhikkhu was a very hard-working and industrious monk. He was a very ardent yogi. He tried to be mindful throughout the day, throughout his waking hours. It is a common fact that during the daytime, one must try to be as mindful as possible, being with the moment and making sure that there are no gaps in between, no gaps of mindfulness. And this was what this bhikkhu did. But the Buddha, knowing that he had encouraged and urged all bhikkhus to be heedful throughout their waking hours, realized that if one were just to continue meditating throughout the whole day without taking any rest, it would be a burden that would be rather difficult for the body to carry. One would become fatigued and would perhaps collapse out of weakness. So the Buddha allowed the middle watch of night, the middle watch for sleeping, for taking a rest. And so bhikkhus at during those times were urged to meditate throughout daytime and through the first watch of night, and to take the middle watch of night off for a little rest. But our bhikkhu was so conscientious and had such a great sense of urgency that he put his bed aside and did not even think of sleeping during the middle watch of night. He meditated throughout the whole day, trying to be mindful from moment to moment, eating very little, being contented with the little that he had, and exercising this very persistent energy.
ဒီလိုထုတ်ပြောရတာတော့ယောဂီတွေအိယာတွေခောက်ထားဖို့ပြောတာမဟုတ်ပါဘူးပြီးတော့အစာလည်းပဲနည်းနည်းပါးပါးစားဖို့အစာငတ်ခံဖို့ပြောလို့တာမဟုတ်ပါဘူးဒီဟာတရားရရှိရတော်ပြီတရားရလို့ကတော့ဘယ်လိုပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်အထုတ်မယ်ဆိုတဲ့အနေနဲ့စိတ်တင်းတင်းအထုတ်ပုံလေးပေါ့ဒီစိတ်ထက်တန်ပုံလေးဘုန်းကြီးကတရုပ်ဖော်တာပါ
Sayadaw, of course, is not trying to suggest that all of you should put up your beds on the side of the wall and not sleep. Nor is he trying to encourage you to fast and to just continue your meditation. What he's trying to point out is the fact that this was a very unusual bhikkhu who was totally committed to the Dhamma. He wanted only to realize the Dhamma, no matter what happens. He was willing to sacrifice everything else. He was willing to be contented with the little that he had. Everything was secondary. And the most important thing was to realize the Dhamma. That is the level of commitment that the Sayadaw wants all of you to appreciate.
ဘုန်းကြီးတို့ကတော့ဖယားမိတ်ကြတာတွေတော့ပို့ပြီးတော့မပြောပါဘူးဟိုအိပ်ပါဒီမှာညင်300မှာတရားမဲမြတ်စွာဘုရားကပင်မမှုတက်တာအောင်အိပ်ရမယ်ဆိုတော့အခုနိုင်နဲ့ပိုင်းလိုက်လို့ရှိရင်4နာရီပါပဲ4နာရီအေးဝပါတယ်ဆိုတော့အေးဝကိုအိပ်ကြပါအေးဝမှာအလုပ်လုပ်လို့ကောင်းတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့လို့တတ်မှတ်ထားတဲ့အချိန်နဲ့တော့မများနဲ့အေးဝတတ်မှတ်ထားတဲ့အချိန်နဲ့မပိုစီနဲ့ပြီးတော့လည်းပဲအစာနည်းနည်းစားရမယ်ဆိုတာလည်းမဟုတ်ပါဘူးအစာတော့ဝအောင်စားပါအားရှိအောင်စားဒါပေမဲ့လို့ဗိုက်တင်းပြီးတော့ငိမ်မိအောင်တော့မစားနဲ့တရားနောက်ချက်ဖြစ်အောင်တော့မစားနဲ့အဲ့ဒါလောက်ဆိုဘုန်းကြီးတို့ကတော်ပါပြီ
The Sayadaw would just like to repeat the instructions of the Buddha to all of you. The bhikkhu that we talked about just now was a very exceptional person. So the Buddha had allowed rest to be taken during the middle watch of the night, which amounts to 4 hours. So please sleep as much as you want and as soundly as you want, as long as you don't go beyond the prescribed time. With regards to food, as the Buddha had instructed, you should eat to your satisfaction. You should eat so that you can get enough strength for you to practice meditation. You can eat to your satisfaction, but don't eat so much that you stuff your belly so full that you start to nod and sleep after your meal. just eat what is sufficient for you to have strength without going through this nodding.
အဲ့ဒီလိုအထုတ်နေတဲ့အခါမှာယဟန်မှာပေါ့လေသူ့ရဲ့ဝမ်းပိုက်တွင်းအစာအာဟာရကနဲတော့မလုံလောက်တော့အစာအင်းကြီးတစ်ခုနဲ့တစ်ခုပုတ်တော့လေတွေထလာတော့ပွားလာတာပေါ့အဲ့ဒီလေတွေကဘယ်လောက်ထိပွားလာတယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီလေတွေကဓာတ်လိုပဲထက်တယ်ဒီလိုဆိုရှိပါတယ်စာတွေကတော့အမှန်တန်ထက်တဲ့ဓာတ်နဲ့ထိလိုက်လို့ရှိရင်ပြတ်သွားတယ်လို့ပေါ့လေအဲ့လိုဓာတ်တွေသူ့ရဲ့ကိုယ်တွင်းမှာဝမ်းတွင်းမှာအစာကနဲတော့ဓာတ်လိုထက်တဲ့လေတွေဟာဖြစ်ပေါ်ပြီးတော့အသက်တည်အောင်လုပ်လိုက်တာအဲ့ဒီလေကဖြတ်လို့ဒီယဟန်ဟာပြန်တော်မူသွားတယ်တည်သွားတယ်တဲ့လို့ဆိုရတယ်
Being so obsessed in wanting to realize the Dhamma, this bhikkhu of ours ate so little and put so much effort that it's not surprising that he had an attack of flatulence. He had some gastric problems, too little food and too much effort, and there was a lot of gas that started to arise in the stomach, and it increased in intensity. It started to bloat up, started to expand, and it is said that the gas became so intense that it was as sharp as a knife, and it just cut him off, cut his life off.
တချို့အစာမစားဘဲနဲ့ကျင့်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေအစာလေးနည်းနည်းစားပြီးတော့ကျင့်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေသတိထားစရာအချက်ပေါ့ဒါပဲ
This is perhaps a good reminder for those individuals who practice by fasting or who try to eat a minute amount of food. This is a risk that is very real.
သူဟာကိလေသာမန်နဲ့ကိလေသာမန်စစ်နဲ့ပေါ့လေရှင်ပြိုင်တိုက်ခိုက်နေရင်ကပဲကြဆုံးသွားတဲ့ဥပဒနာသူရဲကောင်းတစ်ပါးလို့ဆိုရမှာပေါ့လေ
Perhaps we can describe this exceptional bhikkhu as one who died heroically, courageously in battle with the army of Mara.
ဘယ်ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်မဆိုပေါ့ယဟန်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ယောဂီပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပေါ့လေစဉ္ညာသွားနေတော့ပြီးတော့ဒီမှီပြင်းပေါ့မှီပြီးတော့ထိုင်ပြီးတော့နေတော့ပြီးတော့တရားဟောနေတော့အဲ့ဒီလိုအခါမျိုးမှာထိုင်ပြီးတော့ပဲနေအိပ်ပြီးတော့ပဲနေပေါ့လေဘယ်နည်းနဲ့နေပေါ့ပိဋကအလယ်မှာတရားဟောနေတော့ပေါ့လေတည်သွားလို့ရှိရင်ဒါတိုက်ပွဲမှာတည်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်နဲ့တူပါတယ်တိုက်ပွဲမှာကြာဆုံးတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်နဲ့တူပါတယ်
နာရှောင်း
ဒီညာရှောင်းနေတော့ဒီမှာရနေတော့ပေါ့လေပြီးတော့မိပြီးတော့တရားထိုင်နေတော့ပေါ့လေပြီးတော့ပိဋကလည်းမတရားဟောနေတော့ပေါ့လေအဲ့လိုတည်ဆုံးသွားလို့ရှိရင်တိုက်ပွဲမှာကြာဆုံးတာပဲ
A person who dies while he or she is in the process of meditation, whether being really in the walking, or in standing, or in sitting, can be regarded as a hero or a heroine who falls in battle. So too, for a person who dies as he or she gives a discourse to an audience, the Dhamma talk to the audience, and dies, then he or she too can be regarded as a hero falling in the battle.
အဲ့ဒီဟာစဉ္ညာလျှောက်နေတော့မှအားကပြပြီးတော့လဲပြီးတော့တည်သွားတာကိုဒါမှမဟုတ်သူဝိပဿနာဉာဏ်ကရတ္တဖို့ရောက်နိုင်လောက်အောင်မထက်တန်သေးတော့ယဟနာမဖြစ်သေးပဲနဲ့အဲ့ဒီတာဝတိတာနတ်ပြည်မှာတာဝတိတာနတ်ဘုံပိတ်မှာရဲ့တကားဝမှာပေါ့လေဒီကအိပ်ပျော်ပြီးတော့နိုးလာတယ်လို့ပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒါမှနတ်သားသွားပြီးတော့ဖြစ်ပါတယ်သူရဲ့အစင်းတွေကလည်းပဲရွှေရောင်လိုပေါ့လေဝါဝန်းဝန်းနဲ့အမနာကိုချောမလှပတယ်လို့စာအဆိုရလည်းရှိပါတယ်
Our bhikkhu was actually strenuously meditating during the walking meditation when it happened, when he was struck by this very sharp knife, this very sharp wind in his system. As the Vipassana insight occurring within him had not quite matured to bring about the attainment of arahantship. Our poor bhikkhu was reborn in the heavenly realm of 33, the realm of 33. And there he arose. He had a spontaneous birth, and he was as if he just woke up from a dream. He woke up and there he was standing at the magnificent gate of that realm, at the magnificent gate leading to his mansion, to his celestial mansion. He was dressed in all finery, in gold, as befitting a glorious deva.
တရားနဲ့တည်သွားလို့ရှိရင်တော့နတ်ပြည်ရောက်ဖို့ကတော့ဒါလည်းသိကြပါတယ်တရားမရသေးပြီမယ်လို့
So it's very certain, it's very obvious and certain that if you die while you are meditating, even though you may not be enlightened, you can surely get to Deva land.
ဒီတော့နတ်ဘုံမိတ်မှာအတွင်းကနတ်သမီးပေါင်း1000ဟာသူ့ကိုတွေ့တော့ငါတို့ရဲ့နတ်ဘိတ်မှာအရှင်သခင်နတ်သားတော်ရောက်လာကြပြီတွားရောက်ပြီးတော့သူ့ကိုဖြောပြကြစို့ဆိုပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေနတ်ဒူရီယာတွေပေါ့လေ music တွေပေါ့ယူပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒီနတ်သားကိုဝိုင်းရံကြပါတယ်တဲ့
And in that fantastic celestial mansion were 1,000 Deva bells who were waiting, Deva maidens. They were waiting for their master to come. And boy, were they really delighted to see their master arriving at the gate. And they shouted in glee and were very excited. They brought their instruments and put on the best, Sunday best, and started rushed to welcomed their master. They surrounded him and started to play music and entertain him.
Nata edi tu go tu lupi loka ga napi yau bi do ti ma ma ti de bu de.
So our poor hero didn't even realize that he had died and had been reborn in the Deva land.
Ti de so le cha ma hom tai thu sa na ma mo phe. Sik kali phak kale phit bi do naw ta sai phit la da lo ba be. Ba ma cha da mo le phit de twe law taw cha ma mo.
Well, actually death is not something very novel. It's just a shift of consciousness. Just the difference between one consciousness and the next is even faster than a snap of your fingers. And since he didn't even know that he had been reborn and he had died, and he regained his consciousness, he thought that he was still a monk.
I don't know the tu wai yan tha de na thamiတွေကိုကြည့်ပြီးတော့ကြောက်အနီးပါလာရောက်ပြီးတော့ကြည့်တဲ့အမျိုးသမီးတွေလို့သူစိတ်ထဲမှာထင်ပြီးတော့ရှက်တာနဲ့မဟုတ်လို့သူကနည်းနည်းဟိုသင်္ကန်းလေးပါလေးနဲ့ပေါ့လေသူပခုံးပေါ်မှာတင်ထားတဲ့နဝတ္တစာကိုသင်္ကန်းလို့ထင်မှပြီးတော့နည်းနည်းရှက်တယ်လို့ပါလို့လုပ်ပြီးတော့သူတို့လည်းမကြည့်ဘဲနဲ့စိတ်ကုန်တည်းချနေလိုက်တယ်ဆိုပဲ
And thinking that those maidens were just some faithful lay devotees who had come to the monastery, he quickly covered his shoulder. He grabbed hold of a piece of cloth, thinking that it was his robe, but actually was part of his deva costume, and covered his shoulder and lowered his eyelids, being very, very mindful. When the Deva maidens saw their master behaving in such a way, immediately they came to the conclusion that he must have been a monk before. He was a bhikkhu Deva.
Nata, Ashin Nata, Diha Lubi Loga Mahobu, Nabi Loga Va. Tintea adult chain Kamobu, Nazi Chandarigo, Kanzabu, well, Dilo Wami to Pioja.
So the fairy maidens started to explain the situation. Says, Master, this is no longer the human world. You're on Deva land. It's not the time for you to meditate. It's not the time for you to exercise mindfulness. This is the time for you to have fun and frolic. Come, dance, and have fun.
But
our hero was very adamant. He refused to listen to what they were saying and continued to be very restrained in his senses.
Not Duria, Demo de Valley, Dija, Moja, Kaja, the chance who Javoli. Edalu Pura, my Gurumaka, Levi Machi.
So his retinue of maidens saw that he was still not convinced. So they started to play their instruments and made a lot of noise, started to dance in front of him and play music. But still, he was very mindful, very restrained in his senses.
You know, the media Balawa Lazara Nabu Bombay Manega Sabagaika Adasas Ravali, Colombo, Manjibo. Manji, Dwaju Lavida, Duchi, Tomyala, so where. Didama, Manema, do 18 or Nayahamo Drabala. Natapiniva la Suravoli. Manega, do ye do it? I never can an Adoma do Natamandi so where.
So some of these Deva ladies went back to the mansion and returned with a full-length mirror and put it right in front of him. And only when he slowly opened his eyes and saw his image in the mirror did he realize that he certainly was no longer a monk, that he had been reborn in Devaland.
Did Yaha Dhamma Nada do a Sinzare? Ngahare Dilutana Mio Down David or Yahandiago Atodam Ho Food. A mimia so a rat of Hova Yana Pite Tibo, the Impio the Ya Atoda. The Alesa Lebares or Della Gigi, the Sin Chanari Bomadu. Taya whom a people. Eliadi never do Sipia Bido Niraboli.
Upon realizing the strange twist of events, he was filled with dissatisfaction. He was very disappointed. He thought to himself, I had left my home to put on the robe to become a monk, not because I had any desire for this celestial pleasures, celestial wealth, but I had become a monk so that I could meditate and achieve the highest bliss, achieve the ultimate goal of arahantship. Very, very disappointed, but you can see that it was the momentum of his meditation that made him quite oblivious to the sensual pleasures that plainly surrounded him at that time.
Lubi Loga, Dialesa, Babido, Nabi Loga, Yoga, Buguriha. Daya a tone level, Dia Sili, Mapiapo. Daya Alila, Mababu Solution, a Jaja Dhamma, not the media level at top. The Bowie Mania Lemana Canaris, or the Yum Shit of Harvey, they pure Harvey. A good or Tukamia, Mapio Naisha, and a Senzabo. Did do a Mimi had a should I say champion Yashi to it. Left for a poem her body. When we are told should I say champion Mayavene, champion Boemayavene, Moonlight, you a little so. He a little sooner, be a boa muva, la Nabo, Toro, Niamachare Boa Vesura. Boa Bomale do Yamuses Udore.
Asama Bawari. Asama Bawari.
Oh, Dialesa Padara, Homa, Diasili Mapjade.
This is a very good example that illustrates how people who are well established in meditative practice will be able to carry forward their propensity to the Deva land. If you're established in Dhamma, in meditation, and you get reborn in Deva land, be sure that your interest in meditation will still be with you. If, however, you have had no solid experience, no deep experience in meditation, and you find yourself in Deva land, this will be quite a different story. You will be caught in all those sensual pleasures in a very short while.
တရားလက်စားကမပြောက်သေးတော့သူကဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့သူကစဉ်းစားတယ်ဒီလိုနတ်ပြည်စိစိမ်ချမ်းသာမျိုးဆိုတာရလွယ်ပါတယ်တဲ့အယံစက်ကစံပတိနာမဆုလပါတယ်ရလွယ်ပါတယ်ဘာခရဲနာမမဟုတ်ပဲနဲ့ဗုဒ္ဓနာဗတ္တုဘာဟောဒုလဘောတဲ့မြတ်စွာဘုရားမြတ်ပွင့်တော်မူရာကာလကြုံကြရတာကရခဲ့ပါတယ်တဲ့ရှားပါပါတယ်တဲ့ဒီဆိုအဲ့လိုစဉ်းစားပြီးတော့သူကနတ်ဘုံမိမ့်မှန်နဲ့မဝင်သေးပဲနဲ့ပေါ့လေတီလာမပြည့်စည်သေးပဲနဲ့အဲ့ဒီနတ်သမီးပေါင်းခြံရပြီးတော့မြတ်စွာဘုရားထာမောက်လာရောက်ပြီးတော့ခုနစောစောဘင်းကပြောခဲ့တဲ့ဂါထာလေးနဲ့ပေါ့လေမြတ်စွာဘုရားကိုလျှောက်ထားတာပါ
At that point, the Bhikkhu Deva started to think. He reflected. He said, I had, my goal in renouncing the world had been to get this, to attain this arahantship. And now look at what I've got. It's just like a boxer who enters a boxing competition to get the gold medal and ends up getting cabbage. He was very dissatisfied. And he started to grumble perhaps, and he said, well, this celestial wealth is not something that is hard to get. One can get it any time. But indeed, it is very rare and difficult to get the opportunity to meet a Buddha. And thinking that way, and without even entering the gate that leads to his celestial mansion, he turned round and descended to earth to seek the Buddha with his retinue of 1,000 bells.
အဲ့ဒီနတ်ဘုံမိမ့်မှာလည်းမဝင်သေးတာသိကြလားတကယ်လို့ဝင်လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်တော့သူသီလတွေပြတ်သွားမှာပေါ့သီလမပြတ်ခင်သီလအခြေတည်ပြီးတော့ဗောလေစိတ်ဓာတ်တွန်းမြှေပြီးတော့ဒီတဲ့အတိညာနေပေါ်ထွက်အောင်လုပ်အောင်မယ်ဆိုတာဗောလေတရားကိုသိအလေးပေးတာအမှန်တော်တယ်လို့ဆိုရမှာပါပဲသီလပြည့်စရာဖြစ်တဲ့အခြေအနေတိုးတာတော့မှအလွန်ကြီးကိုစောင့်စည်းစိတ်ချုပ်တီးပြီးတော့ဗောလေတရားရာရည်ရှေ့ရှုတယ်ဆိုတာတရားကိုအလေးပြုတယ်ဆိုတာဘယ်လောက်နှီးယူစရာကောင်းတယ်လဲ
You can see that our Bhikkhu Deva was still quite pure in his virtue. He had not broken any precepts yet, and he is still outside his gate. And knowing that once he enters the gate, his morality will be at stake, he immediately turned tail, so to speak, and descended to earth. One can see how much importance this hero of ours places on sila, on his precepts, as a basic foundation for further development of his Vipassana insight. He was only thinking of further development of his insight and was thus very concerned that his precepts should be quite intact.
မြို့သိမိတွေဘက်ကကြည့်လို့ရှိရင်ဓမ္မအမှန်ချောလာတဲ့နတ်သမီးတွေအစင်တမ်းမြင့်တဲ့နတ်သမီးတွေဖြစ်ပါလေခင်နဲ့ဒီနတ်သားကဘလူးမတွေဆိုတာပေါ့လေနှိမ်ချပြီးတော့ပြောတာများတော်တော်နာစရာကောင်းတယ်။ဘာဖြစ်လို့ဒီလိုပြောရတယ်လဲဆိုတာတော့နောက်နေ့ကြာမှာပဲဘုန်းကြီးကတော့ဆက်ပြီးတော့ပြောရမှာပေါ့လေ။ဒီနေ့ဒါပဲတော်ကြအောင်စို့
Perhaps some of the women yogis here might find it rather distasteful that our hero here, who exclaimed that the beautiful Deva fairies that were surrounding him looked like hungry ghosts or yakas. But it may be interesting to know why he said that. However, Sayadaw is unable to talk about it tonight since it's time but we'll continue with this tomorrow.